From the headquarters of Telesur English in Quito, Ecuador, I'm Carla Gonzalez, and this is From the South. Representatives of the so-called Lima Group met on Monday in Santiago, Chile, to discuss the situation in Venezuela. The Venezuelan government has criticized the attempts of intervention by this group of foreign ministers and other former authorities in the region. The prospect of U.S. military intervention continues to weigh heavily on the bloc, as the U.S. says all options are on the table on this matter. Their last meeting was held in Bogotá, Colombia. Canada announced new economic sanctions against the Venezuelan government as Foreign Minister Chrystia Freeland took part in the Lima Group meeting. According to a statement by the Canadian Foreign Ministry, 43 people they considered to be close to President Nicolás Maduro have been sanctioned. The statement did not provide the names of those sanctions, but mentioned that they were high-ranking officials and regional governors. Our correspondent in Santiago, Tiare Valenzuela, was there and has more on this meeting.
The latest meeting of the Lima Group took place in this hotel in Santiago. 13 representatives plus an envoy sent by the self-proclaimed interim president of Venezuela, Juan Guaidó, took part in the meeting. Early in the morning, they arrived to the presidential palace to meet the Chilean president, Sebastián Piñera. This latest meeting was called for with more urgency than before, since in previous meetings the group has been unable to reach any agreement about the situation in Venezuela. This meeting also takes place soon after the U.S. Secretary Mike Pompeo toured a number of Latin American countries, including Chile. During his visit, Pompeo met with the President Piñera, the foreign minister, and a group of Chilean business people. Social movements have strongly rejected Pompeo's visit, saying that the U.S. may be the one who called for this Lima Group meeting.
Tiare Valenzuela from Santiago. And Venezuelan citizens gathered at the Simón Bolívar Bridge on Sunday to protest against the visit of the U.S. Secretary of State to the Colombian border. Mike Pompeo visited the border city of Cúcuta, where he met with Colombian President Iván Duque. Once again, he spoke about removing the Venezuelan government and continuing placing sanctions on Venezuela. Among those gathered at the bridge was Freddy Bernal, the commander of the Bolivarian militias in the state of Táchira. He called on citizens to continue defending their country's independence and sovereignty.
Regardless of anything else, Colombia is a U.S. colony. And as such, the US can do whatever they want there. But here, once you cross the border, it's a different story. This is the land of Simón Bolívar, of Zamora, Chavez, and Nicolas. This is the land of people who demand respect. Therefore, in this land, the US does not rule. In this land, we are sovereign and independent.
And we spoke to Miguel Figueroa, the former head of the Communist Party in Canada, who is now in Venezuela as part of a peace delegation. He spoke about the Venezuelan people's resilience in the face of the United States aggressions.
It's quite clear to us that the maneuver to bring about a very quick regime change or coup d'etat by the United States and its allies has been an abject failure. It has backfired, and in fact there's more support now for the government of President Nicolás Maduro than there probably was even previously. People are indignant about how transparent this maneuver is, how much of a puppet Juan Guaidó is of U.S. imperialism, and they're angry about it. The reality is, however, that these sanctions always permeate throughout the economy and impose difficulties on the entire population. So we're against all of these sanctions. It is in fact a form of economic war, and it is illegal under the UN Charter, under the OAS Charter, and under the principles of international law.
And China has rejected comments made by Pompeo during his trip to some Latin American countries, criticizing China-Latin America relations. The spokesperson for the Foreign Ministry, Lu Kang, said they were blatant lies.
We have noticed some false accusations made by Secretary of State Mike Pompeo against China on the Venezuelan issue. I would like to say that China's position on Venezuela is clear, as well as consistent. We are safeguarding the purpose and principles of the United Nations Charter, as well as regional peace and stability. It should be pointed out that for some time, some US politicians have been carrying the same script of slandering China all over the world, fanning the flames and sowing discord everywhere. Their words and deeds are despicable, but lies are lies. Even if you say it 1,000 times, they are still lies. Mr. Pompeo, you can stop.
On Wednesday, senior diplomats and former military commanders from the United States and Colombia met privately with members of the Venezuelan opposition to discuss the possibilities of a military intervention. This was revealed by journalist Max Blumenthal, and he explained more to Telesur.
And in the meeting was essentially a grotesque gallery of coup advisors, a who's who of the personnel making sausage of Trump's Venezuela policy. That's everyone from former National Security Council officials to current National Intelligence Council officials to a State Department official to the former head of U.S. Southcom, Admiral Kurt Tidd, and General Juan Pablo Amayo, who is a Colombian general working out of the Colombian embassy, as well as Juan Guaido's gang in Washington, headed up by Carlos Vecchio, and David Smolansky, who is now working under Luis Almagro at the OAS overseeing Venezuelan migrant policy. So basically a who's who of people behind the coup were involved in this meeting, which was intended to be kept secret.
And we also asked Max whether this meeting suggested a shift in policy.
This meeting was held for a reason, that the Trump administration and those who are shaping its policy on Venezuela are still seriously considering military options, and you can safely assume that the Trump administration is growing desperate after having failed to dislodge Maduro, as Juan Guaido assured them they would do, after the Venezuelan military has demonstrated total loyalty to the Constitution, after Guaido on his so-called Operation Freedom Tour is failing to mobilize the crowds that the U.S. had hoped he would, after sanctions and a blackout have failed to destabilize Venezuela's government. The only thing left is some kind of intervention. And I noticed the participation of officials from the U.S. Agency for International Development in this. And it led me to believe that if there is a military option being explored, it will be conducted under humanitarian guise.
And in France, the citizens woke up to the smouldering ruins of the cathedral of Notre Dame in the French capital. It took more than 400 firefighters to contain Monday's blaze. The fire destroyed the roof of the 850-year-old landmark, including its delicate spire, which collapsed. But the cathedral's two iconic front towers were saved. It's unclear what caused the fire, but police have launched an investigation. The cathedral had been undergoing restoration work. And thousands watched in horror from nearby bridges and riverbanks during the evening.
Around 6 p.m., we smelled flames. We were in the middle of serving people. I went outside and we were all shocked. It just went up in flames in the time that the firefighters took to get here, which is normal. They closed off the area. A security zone was created. It was enormous. And what's more, there was a lot of wind. The wind and the fire were changing direction all the time. Then we saw the roof collapse. We also saw it on the news. We are shocked. It's 850 years of history. It really hurts. We're sad.
We have more stories coming up. We'll be back.
Para mantenerme saludable, yo corro.
To keep myself healthy, I study.
Για να διατηρηθώ υγιής, τρέφομαι σωστά.
Para mantenerme saludable, yo bailo.
Para mantenerme saludable,
Yo purifico mi espíritu a través del cuerpo. ¿Y tú?
Guide your body. Tuesdays, only on Telesur.
Welcome back. A Trinidadian national has been shortlisted to win the world's richest poetry prize. Dion Brand has been nominated for the Blue Clerk, an original work about the art of writing. The former Port Laureate is up against 6 other nominees for the $75,000 Griffin Poetry jackpot. Brand has previously won the Governor General's Award and the 2011 Griffin Poetry Prize.
For a paper and a coffee, I read. Some say that poets should stay on matters of nature, on matters of love, on the domestic, on language, the esoteric, not history, not politics. I have often been asked what literature has to do with justice, with freedom, with liberation. This is the conservative line of poetry. To stay away from politics, stay away from intervening in the everyday, except to soothe, to bring good tidings, observe beauty.
Social organizations in Chile have protested outside the Ecuadorian embassy in the capital to reject the arrest of WikiLeaks founder Julian Assange last week. The demonstrators described the detention as an attack on freedom of expression by the Ecuadorian and the British government. Assange was arrested after his asylum status was revoked by Ecuador's President Lenín Moreno. He was living in the embassy since 2012.
We believe this arrest is putting Assange's life in danger. Ecuador didn't want him to continue living in the embassy in London with an asylum status, and the reason they gave was that he didn't behave well. But we all know that his arrest has to do with all the information WikiLeaks has released regarding all the illegal activities carried by the CIA and the government of the United States.
In other news, a 7-month-old baby was killed in the department of La Guajira in Colombia in an attack against his father, a former FARC member. Our correspondent in Bogotá, José Manuel Jiménez, has more.
A 7-month-old baby died on his way to the hospital following an attack near the Simón Trinidad Vereda Tierra Grata territory. This is an area where former FARC members live and are prepared to be reintegrated back into society. The toddler was the son of former FARC combatant Carlos Enrique González, who was also seriously injured and remains hospitalized. His wife was also hurt in the attack. The head of the National Agency of Reincorporation denounced the ambush, which led to the child's death. He said the events are being investigated by the prosecutor's office, adding that there needs to be patience and steps to implement peace are carried out. The FARC group has also rejected the assault. In recent times, roughly 100 former FARC members and their families have been killed, and the government has failed to guarantee their protection. At least 50 social movement leaders have also been killed across the country for the year to date. Human rights organizations have said that in spite of the peace agreement, which was signed in 2016, at least 500 indigenous leaders have been murdered. In light of this, 3,000 social leaders from around Colombia will gather in Bogotá from April 18th to May 3rd to call on the government to guarantee their safety and implement peace treaties.
José Manuel Jiménez from Colombia. And 135 Colombian women have been violently killed in January and February 2019, according to the Colombian National Legal Medicine Institute. This institute also said that 56% of those cases were perpetrated with firearms. However, the public prosecutor has only reported 48 femicides in the first 3 months of the year. Both authorities agree most of the cases were reported in the department of Valle del Cauca and Antioquia, The latest UN report about women's rights in the country said Colombia created a solid law frame to protect women, but there is still a way to go to correctly apply them. There has been an increase in the number of people denied visas by the United States consulate in Mexico. Lawyers representing migrants said consular offices are denying visas even though applicants fulfill all financial and legal requirements. This as an amendment to the U.S. State Department's Foreign Affairs Manual, broadening the grounds for applicants to be considered public charges.
At times I want to think that everything will be okay and I'll be able to be with my family again, because it's very difficult to think that I won't be able to return to watch my children grow up, where their life is, where they have their friends. They don't know anything here.
Roughly 2,000 Central American migrants began making their way towards the U.S. border from southern Mexico on Monday. The caravan, which mainly includes women and children, left the state of Chiapas walking next to the Tapachula-Huehuetan highway. Several migrant caravans have tried to reach the U.S. since October 2018, despite threats by U.S. President Donald Trump.
We don't have another option but to migrate. We don't have another option. And if Trump is not happy, well then, but we don't have another option but to do that, because in our countries we don't have any support. We see that on this side. It's better so everyone heads this way. We think that Trump's heart will have to soften, because we have needs in our countries. For our families. We don't come here because we felt like it one day. We come because we have needs. We left family.
A judge in Argentina has reportedly ordered the seizure of the historical archive of the grandmothers of Plaza de Mayo on Monday. Dozens of supporters gathered at the organization's main office in Buenos Aires to protest against the order to make an inventory of the group's financial assets. Protesters claim police are there to seize the human rights organization's historical archives. This is the third time police tries to get their archives. This organization seeks to locate the missing children of mothers detained during the country's last civil military dictatorship. The promenade in Cuba's capital, Havana, has been transformed into an art gallery. The project, called Behind the Wall, showcased exhibitions for more than 60 artists. This is part of the 13th Biennial Arts event, which saw 500 Cuban and 300 international participants. More showrooms were displayed in different regions across the island with the goal of highlighting issues related to migration, human relationships, and shared space.
Behind the Wall is a project undertaken by friends in all the editions. My friends are the ones who support me, the institutions and everything. This is a great project where everyone comes together.
I understand that a city is not a city without people. So for me, people are bigger than cities.
We're taking one last break. Stay with us.
Discover the cultural diversity that defines a continent. The place where art and tradition are part of the same nucleus. Artistic expressions, values, real life. Fridays, only on this world.
Welcome back. The president of Equatorial Guinea, Obiang Nguema, said his country is going to abolish the death sentence. The last time Equatorial Guinea applied the death sentence was in 2014, but Nguema has given a strong hint that the judicial measure will soon be abolished. The abolition is premised on pressure by a political bloc that the country belongs to, the Community of the Portuguese Language Countries, which is against the penalty. The president said he is going to make sure that the abolition is done democratically through parliament. Protest organizers in Sudan are demanding the new military council be scrapped. This comes as demonstrators continue their calls for a civilian government at a sitting outside the army headquarters. The organization that has led months of protests says it wants the military council to be dissolved. It's also demanding the sacking of the country's judiciary chief and the prosecutor general.
We're still in our revolution. Our demands are not met, and we're not going to leave the Sudan until we get everything done. We hope that we can get civil government. We don't want any army government anymore in Sudan. We don't want the Islamic Party, the National Congress.
Egypt's parliament is set to vote on proposed amendments to the country's constitution. These amendments will allow the current president, Sisi, to extend his time in office. Opponents to the Egyptian regime say they will allow the current incumbent to cement his grip on power, and the government has intensified its crackdown on opposition to the changes. If a two-thirds parliamentary majority approves the amendments, they will be put to the people through a referendum. The African Union has threatened to suspend Sudan following last week's coup that saw former President Omar al-Bashir ousted by the military. The Peace and Security Council has given the military 15 days to hand power over to civilians. If not, Sudan will not be allowed to participate in any AU activities until the restoration of the constitutional order. More than 800 people have died due to the Ebola outbreak in the Democratic Republic of Congo, and the World Health Organization has decided not to declare it a global health emergency. The WHO said the Ebola outbreak, which has been ongoing since August, has not spread beyond the DRC, and therefore there is no benefit to declaring an emergency. The statement made on Friday marks the second time the WHO has decided against declaring Ebola in the DRC an emergency. Our correspondent, Oscar Epelde, brings us the latest details about the outbreak.
Sadly, the Ebola epidemic has worsened over the last few days. Health officials in the DRC confirmed 40 new cases recently. Today's report is not available yet, but it is evident that the epidemic is spreading faster. There is a growing amount of so-called community deaths, where people with Ebola avoid going to health centers to get treated because they are afraid they will be quarantined. By doing this, they remain in their communities, spreading the disease, and finally dying there. And distrust in the Ebola treatment centers. Last Friday, the Emergency Committee of the World Health Organization held a meeting with the government of the Democratic Republic of Congo about the situation. However, they decided not to designate this outbreak as an emergency of international importance, and therefore, the borders of the DRC will not be closed. However, the committee did urge neighboring countries to increase their readiness to face the outbreak. Until now, no cases have spread outside of the territories of Beni and Butembo, inside the DRC. Therefore, health authorities hope they will be able to contain the epidemic soon. But some factors reportedly hinder their efforts, such as armed groups working in the region and a lack of communication between communities. One of the main fears is that the virus will spread to the city of Goma or neighboring countries like Rwanda. This would mean the epidemic would become an international emergency and it would be much harder to control.
That was Oscar Epelde from Nairobi. An Israeli court has ordered the demolition of dozens of Palestinian homes, claiming they were built on what the court called a peace forest. Palestinian residents had approached the court to challenge the demolition. However, they said the court threw out their application and authorized the planned demolition. Israeli authorities frequently demolish Palestinian homes, leaving families in the cold. In a historic win for Russia's LGBTI community, a court has ruled in favor of a transgender woman who claims she was fired because of her gender identity. Russian transgender woman Anastasia Vasilieva was awarded almost $28,000 in damages and losses after she was fired from a printing press in 2017. She worked for the company as a male for 12 years and was fired after she showed her employers her corrected passport listing her gender as female.
I didn't hope to win because I understand where I live. I understand my chances, and of course, they were not very good. Theoretically, hypothetically, I had the chance, but I did not expect to win the case.
Several German museums have returned ancestral Aboriginal remains to the Australian Yawuru and Yidingi communities. Skulls and bones were taken from Aboriginal people by scientists in the late 19th and early 20th centuries and brought to museums, universities, and private collections in Germany and around the world. They were often subjected to controversial research about human biological variety. Germany plans to return a total of 53 remains to these communities in April. Investigations into U.S. President Donald Trump, coverage of U.S. mass shootings, and massacre of Muslim Rohingya men by Buddhist villagers are among the year's Pulitzer Prize winners. The New York Times and the Washington Post were both awarded for the independent investigation into President Trump. Meanwhile, Reuters won the most prestigious prize in U.S. journalism for revealing the massacre of Muslim Rohingya men by Buddhist villagers. Photographs of Central American migrants fleeing gas launched by U.S. authorities into Mexico was also among the winners. And with that, we come to the end of this news brief, but you can read more on these stories by going to our website, telesurenglish.net. For our viewers in Africa, you can find us on Starsat channel 461 in South Africa and 539 in Nigeria. And you can join us on social media. For Telesur English, I'm Carla Gonzalez. Thank you for watching.